Can we just really talk about the role of race in this election? Whoever wants to jump in first, but Heather, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I do think Nikole raises a good point. Like, we can't do it alone. African Americans can't keep coming to the rescue of American democracy. And I wonder if you think that this is the moment, this is the time when a true coalition that covers all Americans save the democracy and prevents a second Trump term.
Well, so I'm a prophet of the past, not of the future. I would say that I think that Biden recognized his debt to the Black community and worked very, very hard to make sure his White House reflected actual American support. So it is a very young, very diverse White House. And that, I think, has helped to build a coalition. But I would say that you can't, you'll be shocked to hear this, look at 2024 as a snapshot. So one of the things that Reagan did so incredibly effectively was he married traditional American racism to economic concerns and used the language of economics to talk about race. And we know that this was quite deliberate. I mean, this is Lee Atwater. You know, Lee Atwater says this quite deliberately. This is exactly what he's doing. So what happens in 1980 is you start to see a huge gender split, but you also see the rise of this language that has come to dominate the American right, the idea that Reagan, I mean, there was a preface to it, of course, but Reagan really talked, for example, about the welfare queen, never specifying that she was Black, but of course she was, and he talked about her as somebody who was taking advantage of the federal government to put money into her own pocket. And that idea that there are these un-American people who are attacking hardworking white Americans who are usually men, and they're doing so by taking their tax dollars for things that are supportive of minority communities, or after 1972, white women who want to work outside the home, has become so deeply ingrained among two generations of white Americans who grew up on the Fox News channel and now have graduated to Newsmax or OAN. They have, I think, internalized that idea that they are the only good makers in America versus the takers, and you've heard that, of course, throughout this last 20 years anyway, that I think is a stew that is informing where we are now, because it has taken us to its logical end, which was fascism. And fascism a white fascism turned against anybody who doesn't agree with that project. But I think it's also possible to look at that trajectory of the Republican Party and contrast it with the trajectory of the Democratic Party, who obviously jettisoned its Dixiecrats to the Republican Party in the 1960s and instead doubled down on the Civil Rights Act of '64 and the Voting Rights Act of '65. And then, of course, when that all created the havoc of '68 and then '72 with Humphrey and then McGovern, the Democrats backed off on that. And they said, basically, we're going to try and pick back up those white voters. And that, I think, you see throughout the Democrats' history until this administration, which has said, screw it, we're really going to pretend that didn't happen, and we're going to try and build the world that we thought we could build after 1965. And I think it is not impossible to think that we can pick up that multicultural moment with this new generation of Americans who is two generations beyond the 1980s and sees the world very differently than people who lived through the 60s did.